Oh, we got breaking news! And you know what that means. We finished recording a podcast about 2 hours before it happened. But here's what it is. According to Elliot Friedman, the Toronto Maple Leafs are about to sign Craig Berube to be their next head coach. I'm sure you know Craig Berube as the head coach of the 2019 St. Louis Blues, who won the Stanley Cup, but he's also a former Leaf, which I completely forgot. He was actually a part of several pretty big trades throughout his career, but the biggest one was probably this. The Toronto Maple Leafs trade away Craig Berube, Alexander Godinuk, Gary Leeman, Michel Petit, and Jeff Reese, and they acquire Jamie McCowan, Doug Gilmour, Kent Manderville, Rick Natras, and Rick Walmsley. Now he's back. And there is increasing noise on Marc Savard, who was an assistant coach with Berube and the St. Louis Blues before going over to the Calgary Flames, where he is for the time being. That, of course, came from this tweet from Dan Powers of the Empty Netters, hearing rumblings of Craig Berube as the new Maple Leafs head coach, with the possibility of Marc Savard joining him on the coaching staff. To that point, there was another tweet, this one coming out of Calgary. Boomer, he's a sports personality out that way, on Barn Burner today, said that he has heard that Marc Savard is going to Toronto. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Steve, didn't you used to work with Marc Savard? Steve, weren't you in a commercial with Marc Savard? Yes, I was in a commercial with Marc Savard, and yes, I did used to work with Marc Savard, and I reached out to Marc Savard, and do you think he told me? I'm out of the insider game for a while, guys. Now, with Craig Berube, what kind of head coach are the Leafs getting? Let's look at his record from St. Louis. Mike Yeo was the head coach in St. Louis, and they fired him, and the Blues were in last place. They also had absolutely no goaltending. Roughly around the same time that the St. Louis Blues get Craig Berube as their head coach behind the bench, he was already an associate coach with the St. Louis Blues, they also get Jordan Binnington, just in an attempt to find a goalie who can make a save. And he does. You show me a good coach, I'll show you a good goalie. You show me a good goalie, I'll show you a good coach. That team was in last place at the beginning of January. After Berube took over the bench in St. Louis that season, though, they went 38-19-6 for the rest of the season, making the playoffs and then winning the Stanley Cup. And you might look at that and go, yeah, but that season was magical. It was a flash in the pan. It's never gonna happen again, where a team is that good during the regular season for that stretch of time and then they go on to win the cup. Want to know something crazy I just found out? Not only was Craig Berube's first season as the head coach of the St. Louis Blues not his best season with the St. Louis Blues, it wasn't even second. I'm talking just regular season here. Obviously, he only won the cup once. But the Blues had a .651 points percentage that season. The next year, in 1920, which was the COVID-shortened season, they had a record of 42-19-10, which is a .662 save percentage. 2020-21 wasn't as good, but during the 21-22 season, the St. Louis Blues had a record of 49-22-11, which is a .665 points percentage. As I'm shooting this video right now, like even Frank Saravalli is saying Berube is going to be named the 41st coach in Toronto Maple Leaf history. Expect announcement soon. It's happening. So here's the thing. All anyone wants, all any Leaf fan wants, is a coach that is going to get it done in the playoffs. Forget the regular season. Here's the thing. Craig Berube is pretty good in the regular season. In the years where he hasn't been quite as good, he hasn't had Alex Pietrangelo, who was a huge, massive part of the 2019 Cup-winning team. That and Jordan Binnington was at times completely unpredictable. And in 2022, when the Avalanche won the Cup, Binnington actually had to leave that series with an injury. Who knows what could have happened? But ifs and buts, candy and nuts, all that. So that's one way to look at it, is Berube won a cup 5 years ago, and he's had some really good regular season teams. Here's another way to look at it, and a little bit of trivia. How many seasons did Craig Berube win a playoff series, at least one playoff series, as head coach of the St. Louis Blues? The answer? 2. 2 seasons. In 2019, obviously, he won 4 playoff series en route to winning the Stanley Cup. And then in 2022, he won 1. That's it. Outside of winning the Stanley Cup, the farthest the Blues went as Craig Berube as their head coach was the second round. Worth mentioning that he didn't just pop out of thin air when he was named the head coach of the St. Louis Blues. He had been an associate coach with them, and he was an assistant coach with the Philadelphia Flyers for a long time, and he was on the bench with them when they went to the Stanley Cup Final in 2010. As for Marc Savard, this could be interpreted as overthinking it, but I think it's worth noting. From Joseph Zita of TheLeafsNation.com, Marc Savard was in charge of Calgary's power play this season, if that's what he's coming to Toronto for, generating a 17.9%, good enough for 26th in the NHL. But given the type of player Savard was, and the players on Toronto, he's probably a better option than Boucher. It's worth noting how someone performs with another team, but this also happened with Paul McFarland, the opposite. Some of you, even the hardcores right now, are going, who's that? Paul McFarland ran the Florida Panthers power play one year, and it was friggin' ridiculous. I think it was second in the entire NHL, and the Leafs took him. And everyone expected the Leafs power play to be automatic, and it just wasn't. The expectations for this Toronto Maple Leafs power play in the Matthews era have been sky high because look at the players on the thing! And even though it has regularly been a good power play in the regular season, it's always felt like a bit of a disappointment given the talent on the thing. For those of you who are maybe a little too young to remember Marc Savard as a player, he was one of the most underrated playmakers of his generation of players. And it is actually ironic that a lot of the rumors swirling around the Leafs right now have the Leafs trading Mitch Marner, because I wonder what those two could do together. Or the other way you could look at it is, well, if Marner's going to get traded and the Leafs are going to lose a lot of playmaking ability, it might be good to have that mind behind the bench. I think people get too stuck in what an assistant coach's job is. It's just to run the power play. It's just to run the penalty kill. That's not really how it works. Yes, that might be their main responsibility, but there's a lot more to it. You're sort of the buffer between players and the head coach. Sometimes the head coach has a tough message to deliver, and the assistant coach has to soften the blow. Or they have to back up their head coach. There's a lot of minutia, skills. I think morale is really important. It's not as simple as, oh, they run the power play. So what do the Leafs get with Craig Berube? Well, you saw the clip going around, or maybe you didn't. Let me describe it to you. Sheldon Keefe, before Game 7 in TD Garden this year, he's like, all right, guys, go out there and have fun. Then that was juxtaposed with a video of Craig Berube from Game 7, TD Garden, Stanley Cup Final, though, and he's like, we're gonna win the effing cup! I think it's a big change of pace. It's good that Sheldon Keefe and Craig Berube might have very differing styles, because it's not like the players on the Leafs are going to forget Sheldon Keefe hockey like that. It's not like Sheldon Keefe never taught them anything worth remembering. Berube is going to come in and give them a different depth, a different perspective, and maybe one that adheres more to a Brad Treliving team. We already know the Leafs are trying to be heavier and nastier, and they were certainly that this past season, and Berube is certainly that. Keefe, for whatever you think of him, is a bit more of a gentler approach. There's nothing gentle about Craig Berube, in his entire hockey career. He was an enforcer, and it sounds like he acts that way behind the bench. He acts that way on the podium, in front of the media, calling out players. He's a motivator. He's there to push you to be better. He's there to get the most out of you. Whether you like Sheldon Keefe or didn't, I thought it was obvious by the end that even if you thought he was doing a good job, and there's lots of arguments to say that he was doing a good job, he couldn't get more out of this team than he was getting. Last little nugget, and I totally forgot about this until Andy Strickland mentioned it. Strickland, who covers the Blues primarily, says, happy for Craig Berube, gets reunited with Mike Van Ryn. I forgot, Leafs assistant coach Mike Van Ryn was an assistant with Berube in St. Louis. Can assume Toronto is making a significant commitment both financially and in years. Country club days are over. Hope Toronto players are ready. There's a new chief in town, Strickland says. Right now, it sounds like this announcement is imminent from the Leafs. It might even be up by the time this video is up. So let me say, with my whole chest, Craig Berube is a Leaf! Again, he was a player here, you see. What do you think of the Toronto Maple Leafs' new hire? Do you think Marc Savard is going to join him? What do you think of this, the Leafs basically stealing one piece at a time, the St. Louis Blues coaching staff? And, hey, you know how they got a goalie to win the cup for them in 2019? Who's the goalie? We don't know the goalie. It's going to be a fascinating offseason in Toronto, and it's already underway. For now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you liked this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Playtime's over.